What's up, you little spectators and speculators? This is Nicky G from Better Commander. Today we're going to talk about tips for buying singles. It's a cold, blustery Tuesday afternoon in the Northeast. The wind blows across the tundra, and the children bundle themselves up to go sledding in the snow. Warm at my desk with a fire at my side, I open spoilers for the latest set, and it dawns on me. Lizard Blades is being pre-sold for 79 cents. I immediately buy 5 of the normal treatment, 5 showcase. The total for the order is about $10, and after tax and shipping, it's close to $13. I didn't buy this card because I think it will spike to the moon. I didn't buy it because I want to save for my child's college fund. I bought it because I believe it's a good card, and I'll use it in some commander decks for sure. And at 79 cents, the absolute worst blowout that could befall me is the loss of $13. That loss would be mitigated by the fact that I have 3 decks that it slots into immediately. I almost never advise engaging in pre-orders, especially when the hype is this high, but 79 cents is a decent buy-in price point. And as always, remember, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a chiropractor, I'm not a Florida ballot counter. This is not financial advice, this is how I buy singles for a card game designed for children, and is meant just to elucidate my particular methods. The first thing you need to do is set a monthly budget. For a long time for me, I had a $20 per month budget for singles. Some months this was 2 cards, some months this was 20 cards. The past 3 years I've had a bit more disposable income and have been fortunate enough to be able to buy a little more. But I maintain the thrifty mindset. You want to think about your budget the way this guy thinks about whatever he's thinking about. Okay, the first tip I have is to watch for new and spoiled cards that you can see easily slotting into your commander decks as the sets are spoiled. Last go around with Crimson Vow, I kept a very close eye on Hullbreaker Horror. This card was pre-selling very high, so I didn't touch the pre-orders. After a few weeks of being opened and vetted, the card dropped very slightly to around $8. So at that point, I figured I'm getting $8 worth of power. I wasn't sure if that was the floor, but I knew I was willing to pay $8 for that effect in at least 3 of my commander decks. Whenever a set is spoiled, if you see a card that fits your deck archetype, keep your eye on it. The floor may be in the pre-order phase, though that's unlikely. More often than not, the floor on a card is a few weeks after release when the maximum supply is on the market. That used to be on release weekend when there were paper events in stores and there was a lot of opening and trading. Now the supply gets throttled and released a little later through Amazon, so the maximum point of supply seems to be a few weeks out. The first tip can really be summed up in this concise maxim. Pay attention. With new cards, decide on a price you're willing to buy in and watch for that price. For example, recently with Avabruck Caretaker, I saw this card come down to $12, and it started to creep back up. I bought one at about $12 for a commander deck. Now this may go lower in the future, but in the meantime, I'm using it in a deck, so I'm willing to trade off the ability to use it in a deck for the amount of time that it would take for it to go down, and that's an acceptable trade-off for me. You'll probably not regret buying a card if it's powerful and vital to your deck's function. This is less important now as Commander's driving prices and it's an eternal format, but keep an eye on rotation out of Standard. There are certain cards that move based on their usage in Standard decks. I'm a little fuzzy on rotation because I don't really play Standard, so take this with a grain of salt. Let's talk about Hydroid Crassus. I use MTG Goldfish as a resource here to watch a card's pricing curve over time. Hydroid Crassus was released with Ravnica Allegiance in January 2019. This was a bomb in Limited and saw play in Standard, so it spiked immediately to $30 to $40. It came down in April or thereabouts and stayed at $20 for about 6 months, then spiked above $30 again with the release of Throne of Eldraine. I'm not aware of the Standard meta at that time, but suffice to say this is a good, powerful card that was useful to Standard players. I didn't buy in at that point, even at $20, because I didn't see this as being worth that amount to me. When Zaxara was spoiled, I was researching X-Spells and saw this would be a great fit in that deck. At first I was hesitant, $20 was a bit too much, but when it rotated out of Standard, a supply refreshed the market and they could be had for about $12. At that time I decided to buy one for that deck. Now that wasn't the absolute floor for this card. It's now $10 to $12 for a light played copy and could be had even cheaper for a heavily played copy. I bought in a little higher than the absolute floor, but the point was I kept an eye on it until it reached a reasonable price for me. A recent example that I am keeping an eye on is Meathook Massacre. This card is currently $40 approximately. To me this is crazy high, it's absurd. I'm keeping an eye on it though, and we'll watch to see if this card goes down to $10. I would buy one or two at $10. I don't think I would buy in at anything higher than that. We'll see where it goes when it rotates out. With this card, I think a component of that high price is commander demand though, so that may keep it high. So third tip is to keep an eye out for cards that seem powerful but don't necessarily have a commander deck that takes full advantage of their ability. Cards without decks, basically. So let's take a look at a couple orcs. Brutal Horde Chief is 3 and a black for a creature Orc Warrior 3/3. Whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. 3 and Boros. Creatures your opponents control block this turn if able, and you choose how those creatures block. Dire Fleet Ravager, 3 black for a 4/4. Creature Orc Pirate Wizard. Menace and Death Touch. Whenever Dire Fleet Ravager enters the battlefield, each player loses a third of their life, rounded up. His fists fume with fury and the decay of death, each strike a plague on the hearts of his enemies. I got a couple copies of this card just because I thought it was really cool. And then I saw Greven came around and it immediately slotted into that deck. There's probably other decks that this fits in as well, but I just think it's a great and powerful card. These are both bulk rares, but when I saw them, I bought a copy. I wasn't sure at the time what deck these belonged in, but they have powerful effects and a lot of text. If you see a cool card that's 85 cents, buy it. That's my next tip, distilled into one sentence. And I want to note, as I was writing this morning, a new Mardu legend was spoiled, Ishin, 2 Heavens as 1, from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. It's a doubling effect for attack triggers. This is a really cool card. This means that for every attacking creature, if you had Brutal Horde Chief in the deck, it would make opponents lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. I swear on all that is holy, I didn't know about that, but that kind of proves my point about buying cards that are powerful but don't necessarily have a deck at the time. All right, next tip, look at reprints. Double Masters is my test case here. That was a wild set filled with crazy expensive cards and all kinds of flashy variants. I was really shocked to see Pure Steel Paladin for $2. I bought a couple, and in hindsight I probably should have bought more. It's an equipment staple and is now, even after another reprint in a Commander Precon, $8 to $9. The same set saw reprints of Toxic Deluge and Scarab God. These are both very powerful commander cards. I saw that after their reprints in Double Masters, these cards were selling for approximately $10, and I scooped up a copy of each. These easily slot into commander decks, and I knew they were worth $10. Price memory on these things was upwards of $25, $30, and as I speak today, Toxic Deluge is about $25, and the Scarab God is close to $40. I even put a bulletin out to my play group. I said, hey guys, buy these cards because they won't stay at $10. You can see a brief moment on the MTG Goldfish curve where they dipped after release. I think these cards got lost in the ridiculous chase cards in this set. Double Masters had Mana Crypt, Force of Will, Doubling Season, among others. The non-full art, non-showcase mythics and rares had a big price dip due to the fact that this set was opened a lot, and even though they were fantastic cards, they were not the chase cards of the set. Even Wound Reflection dipped below $5, and that is a great commander card. This tip, consolidated to one sentence, would be to watch for non-flashy reprints in flashy sets. I'm sure I have a ton of other tips and will be glad to expound at a later date, but lastly for today, I would suggest you follow precon deck lists and archetypes of the decks. There are often hidden value cards in the precon decks. You know, you can go to TCG Player and buy whatever you want out of these decks. Wizard is now reprinting these commander cards into collector boosters, so the supply is a little greater than it used to be. Recently, 1000 Year Elixir got a reprint. This card is a colorless artifact that has a ton of utility. I personally have it as a combo enabler in a Kaidel deck, but it also goes into Zaxara. It could be impactful in any deck where your commander taps for some ability. This goes in a ton of commander decks and was edging towards $30 as of March 2021. This should indicate that it's a good card, and it is. When it was reprinted in the Strixhaven pre-constructed decks, it fell to about $4 and is currently sitting at $5. If you bought in at $5, you are definitely getting $5 worth of power. The worst case scenario is that it gets reprinted again, but I don't think it would go below $5 in any case. And if it does, you have a powerful card that you didn't have to invest a ton of money into. It'll slot into one of your commander decks in the future, even if it doesn't go in one right now. And I would say it's definitely a pickup. So if I could distill all that down to one sentence, it would be to follow the precons and buy whatever good value cards are in there. So these are some of my tips and tricks, and I'll think more about this and see if there's anything else I think of, any of the things I've learned in the years of buying singles and playing Commander. I hope this was of some value to you spell slingers and hot tamales, and this is going to be Nicky G signing off.